Dr. Kevin Izzard. He's a family medicine physician and also the co-investigator for the All of Us research program. Dr. Kevin Izzard, he has been practicing for over 20 years.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning, good morning.
Pull up a chair.
Pull up
You
a
know what? We were
chair.
talking about this. I don't know why this wasn't obvious, but pull up a chair to the table because if you're not at the table, guess what? You're on the menu. And so we want to be at the table. So yeah, we're here this morning. Got a couple of guests, and hopefully we can give you something that's gonna feed your spirit and feed your soul, and not Captain Crunch.
Like Captain Crunch this morning.
That's right.
All
Without
right.
crunch berries.
We're going to have some interesting and very informative topics today.
Mm.
And I'm always learning, and I love when our people in different professions can really tell us more about what's going on with our health,
Hmm.
what's going on with the climate, with the environment, and what's going on right now with us. And
Yeah.
so,
You
Dr.
know,
Kevin Izzard, what's going on with you this
right.
morning?
You can't see it right now on the radio, but I'm wearing a mask because I got COVID-19 for the second time earlier this week. Yeah. So um, you know what? Great thing about it is that it is no way at all like it was even a year ago. I got it. I thought I had allergies. So those of you out there who might have allergies, think about could this be COVID? So I thought it was allergies. I was out working in the yard the day before, and then it started to feel like a cold was coming on. And I've got a habit now. If I think I got a cold, I'm gonna test myself for COVID. Okay, so I have a home test. Tested it on Saturday morning. I was supposed to do this men's talk on Saturday also, so I said I should really make sure I'm okay before I do this talk. And guess what? It was positive. So um, it lasted. Symptoms lasted about a day. That was it. I've been vaccinated. I had my first primary vaccinations, those two initial shots, and then been boosted twice. So um, I was pretty good, So like I said, symptoms lasted a day. I'm feeling better. In fact, technically, I don't need the mask now because I'm 5 days out. But I want to remind people that COVID is out there. Um, CDC guidelines have changed, so if you haven't had COVID for a while, or you haven't looked this up, or you haven't been listening, they kind of changed the guidelines from before it was time based. So if you had a test, you had to do 5 days after your test, and then if you were feeling better and didn't have a fever for at least 24 hours, you could wear a mask for 5 days. Well, now they changed. They kind of shortened it, and they're trying to get COVID more in alignment with other um, respiratory infections. So everybody's been hearing about RSV. That's one that's been causing the common cold. I'm going to step back here. We talk about the common cold.
Okay.
Common cold has been around for forever, right? And
Yes.
and there's really been three big viruses that have caused a common cold. One has been coronaviruses. So we all know about coronavirus now because SARS-CoV-2, which is what we know as COVID-19, that is a coronavirus. The other two viruses that cause a common cold are rhinovirus and last one is RSV. So RSV has been kind of taking a big hit lately because we've been seeing outbreaks of RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. It really affects small kids and older people disproportionately, which like most of these viruses do. So anyway, so back to what I was talking about with COVID. Most of us have either been vaccinated. 95% of people now have either been vaccinated or have gotten the infection.
Mhm.
So because of that, and this is what I told people way at the beginning when all this started, before everybody got confused about whether the vaccines are going to prevent you from getting it or was the whole idea is this: going back 3 years when this first came out. The idea was that you wanted to isolate people because you wanted to flatten the curve. We knew everybody who hadn't been exposed to it was going to get it at some point, and because it was new, your immune system hadn't seen it, and we knew that people were going to get sick, which ended up being the case. People were in the hospital. but we didn't want the hospitals overwhelmed. That's what ended up happening. So with the idea of isolating people was that we wanted not everybody to get it at the same time. We wanted to kind of spread it out, flatten the curve, as they say. And so we've kind of got to that point now. We've gotten over the hump of that curve. So most people have had it now. So there's no need to panic about it anymore. You do need to take it seriously because you don't know. Like I said, I wore a mask not because cause I'm feeling fine. In fact, I've been feeling fine really the whole time. But I don't know who around me is taking care of their sick mother, or who works in a nursing home, or has is immunocompromised because they're in chemotherapy. You can't tell by looking at people, especially when you're out in public. So you need to take it seriously because you don't know who around you is maybe more susceptible than you are. So take it seriously. Do it for people around you, not just for yourself, because that's we tend to be selfish in this society. Um, so that's the deal. So the guidelines have changed from time based to now symptom based. So if you go 24 if you're 24 hours without a fever, you're feeling better, you should wear a mask. A decent mask, not one of the gaiters. Something that's like a hospital mask or a well fitting mask for 5 days after that, and then you're good to go.
When you're talking about the COVID virus, and I always think about back in 2020 when we
Mm-hmm.
first identified it, and the All of Us research program, we were actually really recruiting people at that time. And that program, I should say, our program
Hmm.
at the National Institute of Health was able then to look at the biosamples and go back and see exactly when they were able to identify the COVID virus within our participants, and it was a lot sooner than what was projected.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is one area as far as where we are looking at research that can make a difference. And then there's also one thing that the program has been doing during that time. They aren't doing it right now, but there were like these cope surveys to see how people were coping with COVID
Mm-hmm.
and how they were dealing with, from day to day. And monthly surveys were available. So all this information allows for researchers to really assess and be able to identify, some challenges that are going on
It's
with
interesting
COVID.
because we don't having gone through it. It's hard of us to have a perspective. I think we're going to look back at this 10 years from now, we say, yeah, even now, I look back and say, remember when back in December
Right.
or January, February of 2020, of 2021. And, we didn't know whether we could bring our groceries in the house, and we didn't know we could handle our mail, and, all that stuff was going on. And we had no idea about, how to treat COVID. And, of course, we found that, it wasn't as initially thought, so it wasn't as contagious on surfaces. We didn't know that it was going to be airborne the way that it is, um, but we got through it. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting time capsule to look back and see how it affected. Remember the shutdown, back
I
in
remember
March?
that
Yeah,
was very
you
scary.
walk, you drive down the street and there were no cars, a freeway. How about the freeway in the morning?
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
could
had to go
go.
to work the whole time.
I went to work too, and it was right. I could get there quick,
That's right. That's right.
and nobody was hardly in the office,
Hmm.
so it was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
trying time for us.
Yeah, but now we're seeing that it had an effect on people in ways that we didn't expect, like children, kids that didn't go to school. It's affecting a lot of kids that were starting school at that time didn't get socialized in the same way that that the other kindergartners and first graders do, and so there's some delay in some of those kids in their learning. And even the way impact it's had on things like working from home, and that's still a big issue for a lot of people because they found out that they got a taste of working from home and said, "Whoa, why did I go back in the office if I can do my work from home?"
Exactly. So the mindset of people have changed, and technology has changed really to adapt to that. I wanted to just kind of remind people that the All of Us Research Program, we're located at the Medical College of Wisconsin. And people, if you would like to join, or if you need some assistance with just logging back in to get your information because you have joined the program, you can reach us at 414-955-2689. That's 414-955-2689. Or if you want to know more about the All of Us Research Program, you can go to joinallofus.org. And just for those that are listening, the All of Us Research Program is the largest and most diverse health research program of our time. It helps researchers study how our DNA, family history, environment, and lifestyles affect our health. And so you can also learn more about it. And you can also get your ancestry information, and all this that you'll be getting and learning is free. It doesn't cost you anything. People, when you go through those surveys and questionnaires, some people are always saying, wow, that's a lot of questions, because it takes somewhere around an hour and a half for you to complete. But it allows for researchers to get a better idea of who you are as far as with your health. And also, it allows for researchers to be able to identify and assist with finding precision or precise treatment and better decisions with healthcare. And so I wanted to invite people to, call in at our location or go to joinallofus.org and enroll. Our goal, Dr. Izzard, is to really get people involved in the
Mm-hmm.
program of color.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that, Dr.
Yeah.
Izzard?
I was now that I'm on the inside at the table at the medical
He's really at the
college.
table, and I appreciate
I
him
want
at
to
the
push this
table.
point home. Be at the table. Um, but now that I'm a co-investigator, and I'm at the medical college, we had a meeting the other day, and they're looking at the funding for this program. And because this is funded by the NIH, the money,
National Institute of
the health,
Health.
right? This
Okay.
money comes through Congress, and so we know we're in a political year. So there is no guarantee that programs like this will continue or have the same funding, or it's not going to be changed at the whim of whatever administration is in power. So this is an opportunity. We need to make sure that things like this continue. So if you're someone who cares about Black health, you need to be really pushing your politicians, your representatives, to let them know that we want money to go toward uh, giving us access to health information, because that's what it's really about. Information is power, and so the more you can know about your community health and how things are affecting you, the better off we're going to be. And but anyway, so um, this stuff is not guaranteed. So we want to be at the table. We want to be part of what's going on, because a lot of these medications and new protocols and things that are going on are being done without consulting us and without us being in the studies to determine if it's safe or not, or the efficacy of it, or what's the best protocol. If we're not in those studies, then they're using information on us that we were never part of. And traditionally it's been, healthy white men. And so now there's a push to try to get more people. And so a new medication comes out. Has it been tested? Well, has it been tested on minority populations? We need to know that, because we sometimes like COVID is a good example. COVID came out, and again, new virus, never no one ever had it before, and we started noticing Milwaukee, to its credit, was when it was reporting the number of cases. It also included in those infections. It included the race of the person. Now, most communities weren't doing that. Milwaukee was, and because of that, we started to notice that. Guess what? We're seeing a disproportionate number of people in the inner city and in Black people, and that they notice at the hospitals. Oh, the disproportionate number of Black people in the hospitals. If we weren't getting that information, we wouldn't have known that. And so there's importance in knowing these things and getting as much information you can about patients. So now we know that some groups are more susceptible than other groups. And so again, if we're not part of those studies, then we don't know that information.
And that is so true. And so being a part of this research programs allows for people to not only get your ancestry information returned
Mm-hmm.
to you, but it allows for you to get information about your DNA, your genetics, how certain medications work in your system
Yeah.
better than others.
Yeah.
It allows for you to see exactly the probability of some historical things that could possibly happen with your health down the road. You
Right.
might be okay now, but you can, and this information is good because it allows for you to be more proactive
Right.
with how you live every day.
Yeah.
That'll allow for some of those things possibly not to happen.
Right. Imagine this, because right now you go to the doctor, you take a medication, like let's say a statin. Let's say you got high cholesterol, you take a statin medication. Well, first of all, there's certain protocols that go about who should get a statin. Some people are going to benefit from it more than other people. Now, what we're finding though is that a lot of people will have a side effect where they get muscle pain. Well, now we're finding that there's certain genetic types of people, because of their genotype, they're more likely to have those reactions to the statins. Okay, or really any other medication out there. Some medications work for people, other ones don't, and we don't know why that is. Well, now we know that we're getting to the point we can find genes that can identify. So if you have a certain gene, you might be more likely to have a side effect from that medication, or it's less likely to work for you. And that's what they call precision medicine. So now we're getting to the point now where, we can, one day in the future, not in the near future, you'll go to the doctor, they'll be able to pull up, your specific number, and it says, oh, okay, so yeah, you're unlikely to respond to this medication. Let's do this here instead. Or you should really avoid these medications because you're a slow metabolizer, meaning that your liver breaks it down slowly, and so we need to be careful with other medications that are in that same group. So we're at that point now, and part of what happens when you do enroll in this all of us uh, program is that they will do an initial genetic analysis, and that information either is kept secret, or if you'd like to know it, then you get permission, and they will share the information, and you can have the information. You can share it with your provider, and then you can you'll know some things about medications that you should or should not take. And so again, we're getting now more precise with what medications you should and should not take.
That's really key. And for people, when you're wondering about the confidentiality of this program, we believe in keeping everything very confidential. Everything that's put into the system has a number and not your name. Of course, your name goes to one database, but researchers cannot access that information. And so that makes it very important. Even your physician cannot access the information. Insurance companies cannot access the information. Only you can share that information. Even the legal system cannot access that information.
Mm.
Only you can share that information. And so we want to make sure that people know that the confidentiality of this program is very important, because we want to make sure that we are being recognized as
Mm-hmm.
far as how and what needs to happen with our health.
Mm-hmm.
And so being involved in all of this research program, and I keep reaching out, and that's what we're reaching out to people of color, our Black and African American communities. We want you to be involved in this program here in the United States, because it's not just in Milwaukee. Right now, we have over 700,000 people that have had and showed some interest in being involved in the program. There's less, there's some, I would say around 600,000 of those individuals that have given their biosamples and have been a part of this program. But we need, and we have recognized that we still need people of color. We are not coming and sitting at the table like Dr. Izzard mentioned. And so we want to make sure that you do that. So if you are interested in the program, you can call 414-955-2689. This is Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program at the Medical College of Wisconsin, along with Dr. Kevin Izzard. We're getting ready to take a short break. I want to make sure that if you have questions, we're going to have some special guests joining us when we return to really speak about environment and climate and how it relates to our health. And this is really exciting, you all. So we have some more physicians here with us today. So we'll see you on the other side. To call in at 414-444-5250.
It's almost time for Summerfest, Milwaukee's biggest party on the lakefront, with over 600 artists across 3 weekends, including Key Glock, Ken Carson,
I want to welcome everybody back to um, At the Table today. And we were previously talking about COVID and some of the challenges, but also the importance of being involved in research. Dr. Kevin Izzard, we have some special
We
guests with
sure
us
do.
today. And I'm
Mhm.
really excited about, who these women are because there's some power hitters in our and have been in our community for a while. They're physicians and
Yeah,
Dr. Kevin
these are
Izzard.
my partners in crime with the Cream City Medical Society.
You're my partner.
And so let me introduce my partners here. Actually, we got one on the phone and two with us in person here. And on the phone we got Valeria. We call her D. Dr. Harrison is practicing podiatrist. Dr. Harrison's the second podiatrist that got here. Well, I don't know if she's the first, but depending on who, I don't know who came around first, but uh, but anyway, she practices at Milwaukee Health Services, which is a community health center, federally qualified community health center. She's double boarded in pediatric surgery and pediatric orthopedics. She's involved in various medical organizations for which she's had leadership, and she's involved. She's the past vice president for Cream City, but she's the current treasurer and been for a number of years of Cream City Medical Society. She's a secretary and board member of the Pediatric Medicine and Surgery section of the National Medical Association, and the current treasurer of Region 4 of the National Medical Association. She's also a member of the Wisconsin Health Professions for Climate Action, and that's what she's representing today. And we'll talk about what that group is. She's a 2023 graduate of the Climate Health and Equity Fellowship. And Dr. Harrison, are you on the line with us? Okay, well,
I am.
okay, yeah, good
Yes,
morning.
I
So-
am. Good morning, all.
Yeah,
Good
okay.
morning.
Good
Thank you for
morning.
joining us at the table this
yeah,
morning.
I'm gonna introduce
Thank you for having me.
yeah, Dr. Wright and then Dr. Settle Robinson. So Dr. Wright is one of my old buddies. I say old in quotations.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Dr. Wright is actually grew up with Cream City Medical Society. Well, she's been involved since she was a kid.
Okay, it depends on how you define age of a kid, but that's really sweet of you.
Dr. Wright is actually is just recently retired. Her training is in rehabilitation medicine, PMNR. We call physical medicine and rehabilitation. She trained in Chicago, and then she relocated to Milwaukee after her residency. And she initially worked in physical PMNR exclusively, but then she switched her practice to general medicine and geriatric medicine.
Well, and rehab as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, where she worked at Isaac Coggs, and then later at the MLK Heritage Center, and again she retired just this past year, and also has done the Wisconsin Health Professions for Climate Action. Joined that group and done the fellowship, and so actually, I'm not. She's doing it. She's in the.
Yeah, I'm actually just starting that at this point.
Okay, good, and then and so yeah, so she's retired after 35 years, and then last we have not least we have Dr. Renee Settle Robinson, who's a board certified pediatric surgeon with over 40 years of experience. I know Dr. Robinson's been on the NOV for a number of different things. Her passion is feet. I wouldn't say it's a foot fetish, but she's got a passion for feet.
And that's important to get around, right?
She completed her postdoctoral fellowship in climate and health equity in collaboration with the National Medical Association. And she's also former president of a number of years of Cream City Medical Society. And she's a vice president of the Health Climate Wisconsin and actually on the Board of Regents for the National Medical Society. So she is a important woman here. So welcome all three of you. And then before we get to this whole thing, I want to ask this question. So you guys have you've had a career in in medicine, surgery, and now you decide you want to do this climate change thing. How did that come about?
Well, climate climate change affects our health. And as practitioners, that is a fact that we cannot ignore. So we all decide to get extra training so that we can offer our patients that much more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it especially affects our African American population and
Mhm.
other people of color.
Yeah. So I imagine there's like a whole lot of extra training. Dr. Wright, I know you're in the middle of it now. What kind of training do you have to do to get the fellowship?
Well, we have to read a lot of articles and have appropriate discussions
Mhm.
with our colleagues at bi-monthly meetings.
Mm-hmm.
They expect us to do certain exercises that have to do with speaking and addressing the public at large,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's through op-eds, writing, public speaking, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel at the end of your coursework, which is I believe in November, December, most people present a topic that's near and dear to them at the consortium down in DC as a way to say that you've graduated.
Okay.
It's always so interesting when I hear climate change, and I'm always thinking like, and I think a lot of us are thinking like, yeah, that's those people over in the Florida area, one of those other places where the weather is really bad, or different places that don't really affect us as a whole. But you all are here today to let us know more about how climate change can and does affect us in so many different capacities.
So yeah. So yeah, why do black folks? Why should we care about climate change? Because again, this sounds like something that that's kind of a yuppie kind of thing. Caring about hugging trees and all that. So why do black folks care about climate change?
Our communities are more affected by climate change because the dirty little secret that you learn when you're studying about climate change is how it affects our communities worse than it does our suburban communities, if I can put it like that.
Mm.
What you find is that those little things in the air that you do not see unless you turn on a flashlight and it looks like a little snowstorm. You've seen that before when you turn on a
Mhm.
flashlight.
Mhm.
That's particulate matter. That's the fancy word for dust.
Hmm.
Okay. So when I first saw that, like a nice beam of sunlight came in the window, and I'm seeing all these little particles in the air, and some of them look like little squiggly lines, but the majority of it, believe it or not, in your house is representative of your dead skin cells in the air.
Mm.
And the little squiggly line looking things are the um, pieces from your clothing that are shedding.
Mm.
So like 10% of that is probably from your clothes. You don't
Mm.
really see that until you pull the lint out of the dryer.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mhm.
it's getting into the air as well as all of the other chemicals and so forth that are getting into the air. And this is what you're breathing. Some of those particles are not only so small that you can't see them, but some of them are so small that they go directly into your lungs when you breathe. We have all these little cilia that catches the bigger pieces, but the smallest pieces not only get into your lungs, but they also get into your bloodstream and cross what we talk about in medicine as crossing the blood brain barrier.
Mm.
So that means it can get into your brain and it contributes to early onset Alzheimer's and dementia.
Mm.
It also contributes because it gets into your bloodstream to higher incidences of diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. It wasn't until I took this course on climate and health equity that Dr. Wright is in the process of taking and Dr. Hairston has already completed. It wasn't until I took this course that I realized all of the circumstances that Black people face in terms of healthcare. I mean, diabetes does not know your race, but why is it that we have it 2 to 10 times worse statistically when you look at how many people are getting these different
Mhm.
conditions? Why are we getting it worse than everybody else? And it has everything to do with all those little particles in the air that you can't even see
Wow.
unless you have special circumstances. As a matter of fact, you were talking about COVID earlier. In our communities, because the air pollution is so significant, like for example, in terms of parts per million, in the suburbs, they maybe have less than 10 parts per million in terms of the concentration of that particulate matter in the air. In our communities, it's 50 and above. We were in Indianapolis for the Region 4 conference, and I checked because I've got a special app on my phone now. I
I
checked
do too.
to
All
find
right.
out what was the particulate matter concentration. It was 55. And guess what COVID rides? COVID rides those particles, and that's how they get distributed into our system. I remember people didn't want to take the COVID vaccination because they figured, oh, that's only those people going to China. We don't even go to downtown Milwaukee. How are we going to get COVID? And in fact, the particulate matter is concentrated so high in our communities that we had a greater incidence of COVID in our Black communities than we did in our suburban communities.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So I remember last year walking in my office one day, and it was one of those days where we had the bad air quality, and
There were
it
several days
smelled.
like that.
Yeah, it smelled like a campfire.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm almost 60 years old. I never remember having that, that experience. And so it's really kind of concerning that 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 air is coming from Canada. It's coming this far south that we can still smell the wood burning,
Mm-hmm.
from the forest
Right.
fires. And so
Yes.
that's really concerning. And so we know that black kids or black adults too are more likely to have asthma. And I imagine, is that related to all this?
That's related to,
Yes,
yes.
because those particulate matter that Dr. Settle Robinson was referring to, that particulate matter not only crosses the brain blood barrier, but it also crosses the alveoli and gets into your lungs. So therefore, it can cause lung cancers, it can cause asthma or exacerbate the asthma you already have and other lung conditions.
That's really interesting because, excuse me, that's really interesting. And that's a strong point that you make because I always wondered, like, how can people, get lung cancer and they never smoked or, those kinds of things. And now I'm hearing from you all that it's sometimes related to the particles in the air that we are not seeing, but we're breathing every day. And I'm just, wondering, like, now you mentioned, Doctor, the app that you both have on your phone. Is that something that people can access and an app,
Yeah.
or is that something special you all have?
No,
No,
that's
anybody can download that on their phone.
Okay.
Most smartphones, as far as I know.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
handy to have. Like for instance, when I found out I had COVID, I thought it was allergies. So what I'll do is when my allergies are flaring up, I just out of curiosity, I'll go see what there's certain websites you can tell they'll tell you what kind of what pollen is high, the pollen count or the mold count. And so you can kind of see, oh, I'm having bad allergies. Oh yeah, I can see that the tree pollen is high this week,
Hmm.
or the mold count is high. And you can kind of tell just based on the time of year, what are the big allergens. That's going to be it's going to be tree and grass. Is it going to be ragweed? Is it going to be mold? But yeah, I'm kind of curious though about, because the big thing right now, big conversations about lead. After Flint, Michigan, everybody's talking about lead now. As a big environmental toxin. I don't know. What are your thoughts about the lead situation in Milwaukee?
Oh goodness, I'm going to tie that into the flooding situation because what can we do about flooding? We can revive or redo our infrastructure to allow for better drainage because our
Mm.
53206 community has been identified as the most flood prone community in Milwaukee. And we hear a lot of things about 53206. But when we get busy trying to do something about the infrastructure so that there's better drainage of the water so that we don't get that flooding, while we're down there creating that infrastructure under the ground, we can get busy taking those lead pipes out.
Mm.
because the lead gets into our bodies through the water that we're drinking out of the faucet. And that lead is not healthy for our bodies.
Mm.
Though that needs to be mitigated sooner than later.
And I was just wondering about that when you talk about the lead. And we notice it, especially with our children. But how does that really affect us once we are older as well? Because I know, like children that have it, a lot of times they have a challenge as far as how they are able to comprehend certain things. It affects the brain, it affects them physically.
Hmm.
But also as getting older, because I always wondered about that, because I lived in the inner city growing up, and I know that we had probably lead in our houses
Hmm.
at that time,
Hmm.
even though it wasn't identified. And so, how does that really affect us in the long run?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of research being done on that because up until until the 70s, a lot of paint they added lead, so
Mhm.
we didn't even know that it was dangerous, until relatively recently. And I remember when I was a medical student doing a community medicine rotation, and I went out with the health department, and found out the health department they have a map. They know exactly the houses where kids have high lead levels. So they can actually go on a map and they can say, okay, this kid's got high lead. Yeah, they live over here. We know that house had high lead, and so they've tried to contact the landlord to get them to mitigate it, to either either make sure the paint's not peeling at the least, but to really get rid of the paint. The problem is that it's expensive because you can't just take that paint out, because once you aerosolize it, once you start messing around with it, it gets into the air, and then it gets into your lungs, it gets into your system, and so you got to be careful with how you do it. So it ends up being expensive, which is why a lot of landlords don't want to get rid of it. But yeah, we start seeing kids in the inner cities are having high lead levels. Now, what's interesting to me though is that these lead lines, so these water lines have been in Milwaukee for over 100 years. As they start building these houses, they have the water supply underground, and they build a new house and they tap into the water line. Well, those old water lines are all lead. So, and then the houses that came about for the first 100 years after that had lead lines going attached to the lead main line. So now they're using other things. PVC, but still those older houses still have those lead lines, and so it's going to be expensive to try to get rid of those lines. I do wonder though, because it's not just Milwaukee. The other North Shore communities, Whitefish Bay, Shorewood, Fox Point, they all have lead lines too. So now I think we found this out because in Milwaukee, there's a mandate that if a child has Medicaid, that we should be checking their lead levels. So we check their lead levels at a year, and 2 and 3. But if the kids aren't on Medicaid, there's really probably no one checking their lead level. So there
Mm,
may be other suburban kids that have high lead
yes.
level too, but we don't know because we're not necessarily checking it. Or if they do, the doctor's not reporting it, to the CDC or to the health department or anything like that. So, yeah, lead may be more prevalent than we think, and we think that it affects the brain development. So that's the problem. We don't, you lose IQ points when
Right.
your lead level's high.
Yes. We have a caller on the line. I want to welcome the caller to join us at the table. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Happy
Happy
Friday.
Friday.
I just want to compliment you all. This is the second best show on WNOV.
Mm.
Wow.
I went looking for you all at Juneteenth. I saw a banner that said Medical College of Wisconsin, but I didn't
Yes.
see you guys' faces.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We were actually in the parade, but we did not have a table. But if you're
okay.
looking for us, you can call us at 414-955-2689. And I have some locations we'll be at too in the community coming up. So don't fret. We're still around. It's just that we're limited right now with some resources because of the federal cuts, but we are still here and we're still active. But go right
And
ahead,
again,
caller.
thank you for being on WNOV. My question is for the environmental climate subject. you talked about lead earlier. How do you know if there's something in your home? I have a home built in the 1950s, and in 2020, I had to have sinus surgery for a nose polyp.
Mm.
And I swear, I tell my husband, it has probably something to do with the dust or the something in the house. I don't think it just appeared, but could that be an issue or something in relationship to the environment or climate, or is that just something that I need to dust more and air out the house more? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for calling.
I'll be happy to answer that one. It has everything to do with the air quality inside your home. So the things that I have done in my home to make sure that my air quality is optimal, I get the ducts cleaned regularly. I get the filter changed on my furnace regularly. I have an extra attachment to my furnace that mitigates the particles in the air that can cause infection. So
Mm.
it does kind of like an infrared type of I can't explain it well, but it eliminates all of those potentially infection causing particles that are being blown through the house
Yeah.
through the furnace. And then to top it all off, I got one of those little monitors that I can put in a room, and it will determine what is the quality of air in that room. So if the quality of the air is poor, the number will be closer to 0. And if the quality of the air is closer to 100, then the air is nice and clean and healthy.
Yeah.
And mine consistently stays in those 90s.
Yeah, I got one a similar one. It's a floor thing. So mine isn't attached because I have an older house, so we don't have forced air. But it's a Shark air purifier,
Yeah.
and it's got a HEPA filter on it. So HEPA
There
means
you
that
go.
it goes out. It's a it filters down to 2 microns or something like that. So like a red blood cell is 7 microns. So this is smaller than even a blood cell size. And so you want to, and we started talking about this stuff because when people are wearing masks, hospital masks are not as clear, nearly as good as as the HEPA mask. So anyway, so yeah, the interesting thing is that I noticed that even if someone's cooking downstairs, that the number will drop from 100 down. So someone must be cooking something. I can't smell it yet, but I can see the particles in the air because
Exactly.
the reader goes down to 87% and says, oh, okay, someone must be cooking.
Yes,
Wow.
yes,
Wow.
Yeah.
yes. And you mentioned something about HEPA filters and 2 microns. They've determined that particles that are 2.5 microns are small enough to go directly into your bloodstream.
Mm, mm,
So when you see any articles and they say PM, that stands for particulate matter,
mm-hmm.
2.5, then they're talking about the particles that are in the air that can not only get into your lungs, but go directly into your bloodstream.
Right. And that's why I had the N95 mask because they filter out 95% of those particles.
Yes,
That's where the
yes.
N95 comes from.
That's really interesting because I remember doing COVID time when everybody wore masks and I was wearing them. I didn't get sick. I didn't get colds. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
eventually I got COVID, but I think almost a lot of us did. But yet and still, I noticed like for that whole year, I didn't have a lot of complications that I previously was having with my allergies and everything as well. And so, that's really interesting as far as, and I think it's very informative for us to know what we could do in our homes. I know my husband's always telling me we need to go and get,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, okay, I guess he's right. I guess I need to really consider that a
Yeah.
lot sooner than later.
Yeah.
And how often do you suggest we do that
How often do we
to get the
suggest-
filtering for the home? And
Oh, you need to be doing that on a constant basis. And I just wanted to let people know that there is a very inexpensive way of creating better air quality in your home. You can get a box fan and get one of those filters that go in your furnace and just tape it to the back of the box fan and turn it on high, and all of the air in your room will circulate through that filter, through that box fan, and will reduce the particulate matter in your room.
Wow.
One more thing for the caller, I thought about that. She was talking, was that make sure that your basement is dry, because a lot of people are finding that they have mold, and that could be triggering your allergies. And when your allergies, because allergies really, your nose gets congested, and it's a reaction that you have to something that you're allergic to. Well, when your nose gets blocked, then what happens is, guess what? Your sinuses can't drain because your nose is congested, and so that's why people get sinus infections when they have allergies. And so it could just simply be that your allergies are being triggered by by the dust and the mold that's in your basement. But worst case scenario, you could have one of these really bad molds that are growing down there. If your walls have really gotten wet and now it's just growing in your walls. So that's another thing to consider.
And that's the importance of having a dehumidifier too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a dehumidifier and an air purifier in my basement
Mm-hmm.
because the
Also-
basement is the worst area.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for the caller, there is a website, airnow.gov, which also gives you the air quality. In addition to maintaining good air quality, I recommend that you keep your environment well sealed, like your windows and your doors. And Dr. Settle Robinson talked about the box fan, which is a good thing. But you also want to decrease the air pollution from places like the fireplace, candles, gas stoves.
Mm-hmm.
And it is recommended that your air room temperature should be less than 80 degrees Fahrenheit.
Hey, and you know what? You had something, because I wanted to throw one other thing at you guys. Speaking of your room temperature, it's been hot lately. I just heard something just recently talking about how cities can be 10 degrees hotter than the surrounding suburban communities because of all the concrete.
Concrete jungle.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So you want to talk about how that affects our health?
Yes, that is called a heat island. Lots of times in the inner city, you don't have the tree coverage, so therefore you don't get the shading, and you get what they call heat islands, the 5 to 10 degrees hotter. And if you're hotter, then you have other problems that occur. For example, in pregnant women, you might get early contractions. And then I think we talked about the fact that air quality also can cause, early dementia / Alzheimer's, cardiac events. And a lot of people who live in not only just in the inner city, but period, also take medications. And some of those medications affect the way your body regulates heat. So now you're in an area that's in heat island. It's 10 degrees, 5 to 10 degrees hotter. You're taking certain medications for cardiac or high blood pressure problems, and your body is not able to regulate the heat as well as it should. So that's a compounding factor.
That's a very good point.
We have another caller on the line. Good morning, caller. You're at the table. Good morning. Hello. Good morning. You're at the table.
Yes, I heard the young lady say earlier that the air quality and filtration systems were better in the suburbs than they are in the city. But since '94, with the redevelopment of the downtown area, are you saying that because the suburbanites are now moving back into the city, they're going to build something that's going to make the air and other things better for them in the inner city, and they're pushing us out into the suburbs?
We can only hope that
I
we
know,
can get
right,
pushed
right.
out to the suburbs.
Yeah.
I got this joke.
How we want to answer that, you all?
I got this joke I always tell, so you go down these, if you ever try to get air for your tire in the inner city, you don't find any free air. You go
It's like
you go to the
$3.
suburbs. Yeah, I know, right. You can pay $1 or $1.50 to pump air, and you go out in the suburbs and the quick trip, and it's free. And I would say, Yeah, I know.
This
I know
is
you're
not
talking
a
about. Yeah,
joke.
yeah.
I'm saying that because the redevelopment in the Milwaukee area, mostly around downtown,
Mm-hmm.
and the old breweries, they've redeveloped all this land, and
Mm-hmm.
you used to be able to buy one of those big old houses for $5,000.
Right.
Now they cost you $250,000.
Right.
Are they doing something to the infrastructure that's going to improve the environment around these areas? And maybe we should be considering not moving out into the suburbs.
Yeah. I think that there's something to that as far as these all these new condos going up downtown that don't have lead lines. So at some point that things are going to turn over just because you have a higher tax base, and when you have a higher tax base, you're going to get better services along with that come along with that.
Well, I want to say it differently. I just want to say because the white folks are moving back into the city because of political reasons, that they're going to create a better structure for them to live, and the areas in the suburbs that they built up are going to deteriorate as more minorities move out into the suburbs.
Amen. That's
Okay.
you're gonna see that crime it takes a whole nother priority. When when you got people that have
Right.
money that are being
Yeah.
affected by it.
Yeah, you're joining us at the table. We want to thank the caller for calling in and for providing your questions and comments. We're going to be back on the other side. For those that are interested in calling and would like to speak to the professionals here today, you can call 414-444-5250. This is Karen Dotson. I'm at the table with Dr. Kevin Izzard. We're also at the table with Dr. Settle Robinson, Dr. Carla White, and also Dr. Valerie Hertzton. We will join you on the other side. Thank you. We're talking about areas that we need to be concerned with, areas related to our health, our home, how we can filter the air, how we can make sure that we are conscious of what's really going on in that area. And I wanted to also talk to Dr. Valerie um, Hurston about the climate change and how it affects food and what are the consequences of that.
Well, I first want to address the cause of climate change because a lot of people don't understand why does climate change occur in the first place. And the primary driver of climate change is burning the fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are at the center of climate change, and they are burned for every aspect of life. For example, heating, transportation, electricity, making computers, paint, and household appliances. And fossil fuels are like carbon dioxide, sulfur oxide, nitrous oxide, and what Dr. Soto Robinson referred to earlier as particulate matter. So climate change on food in particular is problematic. Climate change causes increased flooding, which increases food and water contamination. Climate change also causes increased droughts, heat, as we see, and flood. That causes decreased livestock and ground crops. There's also an increased runoff of fertilizers. And when you have fertilizers, and a lot of them are nitrate based, that harms the fish. It also harms shellfish. And then you also have rising carbon dioxide level, and that decreases the nutritional value of some of our ground crops like wheat, rice, potatoes, and barley. And extreme drought and temperatures and precipitation, when this happens, it reduces the crop yields. And lower crop yields raise crop prices. And that can lead to a 20% increase in malnutrition. And the consequences of food scarcity and increased food prices, and we talked about earlier some of the people who are financially challenged already, now they have food, they have decreased quality, it's a little bit more scarce. So anything that they have in terms of diabetes, hypertension now is magnified. And of course, it affects people of color more, African American, Native American, the Latinx communities. And these are the people who are more often exposed to food apartheid. So what happens is you have fewer choices because of food apartheid in the first place. You have decreased nutritional value in your food, and you have less of it. So now you are a lot of times forced to make poor food choices. You make food choices that are high in sugar content, high in salt and sodium. It already lacks the nutritional value, as identified earlier. It's high in fat, high in omega-6 fatty acids. And what happens? You have poor health outcomes, increased inflammation, heart disease, hypertension, strokes, obesity, diabetes, poor circulation, wounds that don't heal, nutritional anemias.
When you mention inflammation, can you explain why that's such a, because I know that I always hear that a lot, and we have that in our community related to so many different illnesses. So explain how inflammation really affects our health.
All right. Well, first of all, I think one of the worst culprits of inflammation is sugar. And we're not talking about the sugar that comes naturally in carrots or strawberries or grapes. We're talking about man-made sugars, the words that are in oats like fructose, high fructose corn syrup, maltose, and all of those alcohol, sorbitol, and all those things that you see added to food. And what happens is when you eat products that tend to inflame, you increase risk factors for chronic conditions like psoriatic arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, gout.
Wow, because I know gout has always been, questionable, and I always think about when you get older, that's something that we see more of. But I'm seeing younger people also getting that too. And so, what you're saying is that inflammation in the foods that we eat can really affect our different health related issues on that aspect.
Yes,
Yeah,
it can.
yeah.
especially
Eh,
as it relates to vascular disease. And we
Uh-huh.
have vessels throughout the entire body, and then that's a primary precursor of illness in many of our patients.
Okay, you want to speak a little bit more to that?
Uh,
I always like
That
to
actually,
educate the community. I always like to educate the community related to health.
well, it's true what Dr.
Yeah,
Harrison stated. That's the actual root cause of a lot of the problems that we're seeing. It's not one bad, essence of smog. It's what it does in general to our bodies as animals, and we see it in livestock too, in terms of, they're exposed to the same atmosphere that we're exposed to, and the quality of their meat, and same thing with humans. So, and that is something that has changed culturally based upon how we farm and what we choose to have as ready fast foods. And the reason for this is that there's a lot of use of the environment to grow crops and things that are later manufactured into foods that can be stored. And so a lot of things have changed in the last 100 years because we have refrigeration. We have things that are, what is it? Preservatives. Yes, that's
yes.
another thing. And when you look at everything, you say, well, gosh, why are people, not living, to 90s and this, that, and the other? Well, it's so multifactorial. I really can't get into it, but climate and health and just what we are now eating for the sake of convenience, for the sake of storage of food. If you are impoverished and you don't have refrigeration, has had a drastic effect on the human body. And we are not as physically active anymore because we ride in cars and buses and we take planes, and we use all of the oil that's produced in gases to pollute the environment by those means.
Mhm.
So it's really a combination in terms of lifestyle, in terms of what many people are forced to eat. If you talk about farming communities like the Amish and other isolated communities, indigenous communities that if they don't have fracking and other things happening on their lands, you will actually find that they can actually control a lot of their diet. And if they live in areas that are not near power plants, not near major highways, they can decrease their ambient intake of poor air quality or particulate matter because they may not be living close to centers and highways that produce a lot of that. And then you also have power plants that produce a lot of particulate matter as well. But it has been shown that with climate health, the atmosphere is increasing very slowly but steadily, and we have to do something to decrease this because we know that that is the driver of some of the things that we are now aware of in terms of food production, overall health, global warming, etc.
I want to just talk to the community and say if you have questions, please feel free to call 414-444-5250. We have some professionals here today to discuss with us about environment and climate. And I also want to acknowledge that Dr. Uh, Valerie Hairston is going to be leaving us because she has to see some patients in the near future. But I do want to ask you: do you have any closing words to give to the community about this topic?
Yes, I do. Um, I want to recommend that people are very selective about their food choices. The Probably the best diet is a whole food plant based diet. And I guess the second best would be a Mediterranean diet. And I really want the public to know you have to learn to read your labels. If your label has in it sugar that's added, that's not good for you. Believe it or not, sausage, tur- uh, sausages, bacon. If you look at the label, most of those labels have sugar added to them. There are a few brands that don't, but please be careful. Your salad dressings, look at your labels. A lot of them have added sugars, and added sugars is the culprit. So be careful. I suggest that you minimize your canned veggies, eat lots of fresh or frozen fruits and veggies, and decrease the red meat because the red meat actually is contributing to environmental change, the production of red meat. And I also wanted to talk about mitigation. We talked about some of the problems, but there are some things about mitigation, like the three of us really try to educate our patients about their lifestyle, including their food selection, eating more plant-based diets. Um, Patronize your farmers markets like Rondi's Food Markets, Alice Gardens, places like that. Be active in trying to get major grocery stores in your community because a lot of our community suffers from a food apartheid. And we should think about elimination of redlining and gentrification because that has contributed to some of the problems as well.
That's food for thought, right? As
Mhm.
we continue to, go through this journey of health and what's going to allow for us to live longer and be healthier in this process. And so looking at the labels and making sure that, I was also thinking about when we're looking at moving somewhere or, where you're going to stay, don't stay around a busy street. I'm like, oh my God, I'm just thinking about, the highways and how, those things are like right there in our communities. And so we need to be mindful, like where we're going to stay. And even if we're in an apartment or you're in a house or a duplex, whatever you're in, you need to be just conscious of that. Can you all speak to that?
Well, I'll speak to that. The people who live closest to busy streets and major highways are now subject to all of the particulate matter that the exhaust puts into the air from all of the different cars and trucks and so forth. And that particulate matter reaches people for, I think it's 300 feet from the highway. And a lot of houses are lined up right along the highway. They're subjected to the noise of the highways, they're subjected to the particulate matter that comes from those exhausts. And all of that contributes to poor health as well.
And it's happening on a 24-hour basis. It's not like they're going to work and they're traveling maybe through a very polluted area for 15 or 20 minutes twice a day, coming and going. This is a consistent exposure.
Mhm.
I think of homes that are along freeways, forget about interstates, but when the freeway is dropped down in a lot of major cities, including here, and you have businesses and you have homes within 1 or 2 blocks, and that's the ambient air quality 24/7. It's something for you to consider.
I always wonder why we're houses right there by the highways, and it amazes me how some places are still building up like that. And so we have to be mindful and protect ourselves. But also, like, we learned something very valuable today, too, is that we need to make sure we have good filters in our homes. That we also, there's devices that we can buy and things that we need to do. Because I don't know how people feel, but I'm going to get busy as far as what we need to do in the quality of our homes and our air because we do have some control,
Yes.
and you mentioned about the different type of equipment we can buy to help filter the air. Also something very simple as getting a fan
Mhm.
and putting a filter, a furnace
Mhm.
filter behind it.
Mhm.
I mean, that was something that was original. And that's
Mhm.
something easy to do because those filters don't cost that much.
Yes.
And you can put those right on the fan there and just kind of attach them in some kind of way. I mean, like, it's not that hard. You just tape them on or whatever. And then as the air is blowing, it's filtering that air.
Absolutely. That's something easy that you can do if you have a child that's suffering from asthma and it's the environment that they're exposed to that's precipitating these asthma attacks. When they go into their room, their bedroom, or whatever, you can put one of those fans in their room and shut the door, and it will clear the air that's in the room and give them some relief.
Now, that's something I did not know. And I think that's something that we definitely can do. And we all, some of us have fans, most of us do.
Mhm.
And to kind of have that filter is something very cost effective as well that we can do. But I want to acknowledge the time with Dr. Harrison. And I want to thank you for joining us at the table. The other two ladies are going to be here with me to the end. Dr. Izzard had to go see patients as well. But I thank these two ladies for taking the time out. And thank you, Dr. Harrison, for being with us today, and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
She is definitely the queen when it comes to food and how it is affected with climate change.
Well, we're going to learn more, and I'm just excited about the work that you all are doing during this climate change area. And so, as we proceed through this process of learning, we're going to come back on the other side. Are we going to keep going? We have a caller. Oh, okay. I'm trying to read sign language over here, so please be mindful of me. But we have another caller on the line. And caller, you're at the table. Good morning.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation, and I could always use my orange juice at this time of the day. Thank you. So,
Yeah, I like that. Orange juice and coffee. I didn't say that today, so thanks for reminding me that we need to grab some. Go right ahead.
liquid sunshine, most certainly. Good morning, Miss Karen. Good morning, Mr. Devo. Good morning, ladies,
Good morning
morning.
to you.
and good morning, Milwaukee. Tyrone W. speaking. There's so much on the table, so I'm just going to rapid fire and then get out of here because I know you're up against the clock there with it. I didn't want to suck all the air out the show. I appreciate what Coach Al Holmes has talked about. Good morning, Coach. Yeah, he was that was factual about what he talked about everything downtown and then moving back out to the suburbs. So he was right on point with that. So I appreciate that coming from Coach Holmes. That's very factual there. So but a lot of different things here. Going back to the dust particles, and then I'll touch on the highway stuff. I know with the different formulas in the gasoline, they've got a winter formula and they've got a summer formula. And it always seems that in the summertime, they're like, I don't really have allergies, but I mean, I can sit outside and pollen and different things from the vehicles can really send me into a series of sneezing and maybe even, just itchy nose, sneezing and coughing. Not every day, but occasionally. I know you mentioned about the dust mites and the pea dust and all that stuff, the dust particles. And
Mhm.
I asked a question a couple of weeks ago. Well, if it penetrates the brain membrane and the bloodstream,
Mhm.
what is the danger to the actual getting all of these, even the microplastics? I mean, just so much microplastics, lead, all this different stuff here, the mold, the radon, all this stuff is dangerous to us. What's the
Yes.
danger? What's the danger of all this stuff getting if it gets into the bloodstream, it also can get into the sperm too. And that's, I mean, you've heard, well, you sound like your mom, but you look like your daddy though. Well, that's because your blood and your sperm carries your DNA. That's why that's why Serena Williams looks like a lot like her daddy there, even though she's, a lady.
Okay.
But
Okay.
anyway, so yeah, what's the danger of all of this stuff getting into the sperm? And kind of a continuation of what I've asked a couple of weeks ago. And I'll listen to you over the air. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, ladies. Have a
Thank you
great
for
weekend.
thank
Thank
you
you.
for calling in and sitting at the table with us. So we have some conversation, and really it relates to how does this affect us with reproduction, um, ladies.
Mr. Tyrone is funny. Oh my goodness. He was talking about how it affects the sperm and why is it that the girl babies end up looking more like the daddies and the boy babies look more like the mamas.
It's just a mix of the genetics. Can't
That's
talk
just
about
the
that.
genetics. And it,
That's not related to
I was
pollution and
cracking up.
particulate matter.
I know, but it's interesting how people think, and so,
Yes.
but it does, can affect our babies and women that are pregnant. It
Yes.
can affect that,
It
right? As far as the
does.
health of that baby.
It does. When we had over 200 professionals come together and read over 450 articles on all of the things that can contribute to premature birth. They were trying to determine what is the reason for Black premature birth being such a higher level than white premature birth. and it had everything to do with the environment. And that's why I say when you're studying about climate change, environmental injustice is that dirty little secret that's embedded in the whole climate change. In our communities, we have all of the different factories that are going to pollute the air and pollute the land and pollute the water. They're located in our communities. Sometimes you'll see on TV if there's a factory that's going to be a big polluter and they want to locate in the white suburbs, people come out
They
and,
come out. Yeah,
lay
they
down on the
protest.
ground and
Yeah,
everything to make sure
they
that they
know,
don't
right?
come out there. Said take it in the inner city, and in the inner city they come to us and they say, we're going to bring jobs. and so we're like, ooh, we need jobs in our community, bring it. And so when they do locate it, you'll find out that the majority of the people that are getting those jobs are driving in from the suburbs to do those jobs. And how much did it make a difference for our community? No, it really didn't make that much of a difference. But in fact, it contributed to worse air quality than we had in the first place.
This is Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program at the Medical College of Wisconsin. You are at the table with us this morning. We have some wonderful conversation related to our environment, our climate. We're going to take a quick break. Please feel free to call us at 414-444-5250, and we'll see you on the other side.
Attention all vendors and community partners. Get ready to showcase your services and make meaningful connections at
I want to welcome everybody back to At the Table with the All of Us Research Program. And we have some wonderful people joining us. Dr. Carla Wright and Dr. Renee Settle Robinson are here to have conversation with us about climate change, about our environment. And we have a caller on the line. So I want to welcome the caller this morning. Caller, thanks for joining us at the table this morning.
Good morning, and to all of you. You were talking about the environmental thing when it comes to our areas. There's a company on about 30 something in Villard, which at one time was located in another area in Milwaukee further north. And those people complained because the floods in the sewer system was so thick. They didn't pay their fines and they ran them out of there. And where did they locate? I'm not going to say the hood, but they located in our neighborhood. The stench is so bad from that company. I don't live in that particular area, but my aunt does. And she's reported it time and time again with no result. And I just wanted to know, Dr. Robertson, is that the doctor that she was do feet? Is that her?
Yes, ma'am. That's me.
Oh, I want to thank you so much.
She does
Let
speak
me tell
very
you
well.
something. Let me tell you something. 10 years ago, I was a raging diabetic. My toe, I had an abscess on my toe. And I went to see her at Aurora. And I can't tell you the fear I had and how you comforted me. It almost makes me tear up. And not only did you do that for me, you explained to me, made me change my lifestyle. Can I say that?
Wow.
But that's something
Made
I'll
me
never get
change my
tired of
lifestyle.
hearing.
Wow. She just mentioned that's something that she will never get tired of hearing. So thank you for calling in to let the community know just how awesome of a person and the women that we have here today joining us.
Made me feel good about that old big needle in my big toe. I was all right after I hopped on out of there. Thank you so much. Y'all have a beautiful weekend.
Thank you for calling and sitting at the table with us this morning. Thank you.
Well, she talked about the fact that the neighborhood where her aunt, I think, is living,
Yes.
has a smell to it because the sewers are sick and the area is flood prone. And that was one of the things I wanted to talk about.
Yes, go right ahead.
Our communities are not being addressed with regard to that flood circumstance. There is an organization here in Milwaukee called the Milwaukee Flood and Health Vulnerability Project. And I participated in that as well. That's where I learned about flooding and how it's disproportionately affecting certain communities that are not being addressed with regard to mitigation. And we need to make sure that those communities get the infrastructure necessary to minimize flooding. Some of the other doctors on the panel talked about flooding and how it contributes to sewage being brought into those floodwaters, chemicals being brought into those floodwaters. Everybody knows that those floodwaters move fast, and there's all kinds of debris that's in those floodwaters. And think about the fact that when you are in a flood, how are you going to get out of it? You've got to walk through it.
Yes.
And that's where my precious feet come into play,
Mhm.
because you have to have your feet totally immersed in that flood water to get to safety. Oftentimes, after floods, we have an increased risk of amputation. The rate of amputation goes up when a person is exposed to floods. And Dr. Wright would probably want you to understand that our disabled and elderly have less ability to get through that circumstance. And so, in terms of preparing for the possibility of floods, we need our cities to plan to make sure that those people who are more vulnerable to getting stuck under those circumstances and can't move out of those circumstances as easy as the rest of us, there needs to be special circumstances available for them in terms of flood preparedness. Now, are we going to get more floods? Heck yes, we're going to get more floods. Because if you look at global warming, the kind of like the measuring stick that's being used is the glaciers in Alaska. There was a time when we had over 150 glaciers, and that's, strong ice that's been there seems like forever. And do you know that because of global warming, because of all of these exhausts coming from our cars and our factories and so forth, that is making that increased blanket around the earth to where the entire earth is warmer now than it used to be. Those glaciers have dropped down from 150 plus to in the neighborhood of 30 glaciers.
Oh,
That's why I
wow.
went to Alaska last year, because I wanted to see a glacier before there was no such
Mhm.
thing anymore. They're looking at the fact that once those glaciers melt, our sea levels are going to be rising 10 feet. They're already in the process of rising. And that's why you keep hearing about coastal communities being eroded. And now the waves are getting big enough because of the rising sea level that some of the waves are coming up and flooding the
Mhm.
communities that are
Yes,
right on the
that's true.
coast.
Yes.
Are we going to get more floods? Yes, we're going to get more floods. The one you want to pay attention to is called Thwaites. There is a glacier in Alaska that is about the size of the state of Florida, and it's called Thwaites. It looks like the word wait, like wait, wait, wait for me, but it has a TH in front of it and it has an ES at the end. That's why it's pronounced Thwaites. They nicknamed it the Doomsday Glacier because they're paying attention to how rapidly is that glacier melting. When that glacier melts, that's when all hell is breaking out in terms of floodwaters. We might have to find a Noah's Ark.
Wow. Thank you for explaining that because we always hear about, climate control and our environment and what, needs to happen, but that really can affect and will affect all of us. It's not just certain areas and certain places. That's what you were telling us right here.
Exactly. Exactly.
The other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on too is about the conversation that I would like to have related to extreme heat. I know that there's been some concern about extreme heat, how it affects us, and I'm just going to ask if Dr. Carla Wright can speak to that.
I can speak to it on a personal level with my patient population, which tends to be middle-aged, up into the geriatric age, including 100. And I had a personal situation with several patients, at least last year and the year before, that were involved with hospitalizations that were related to extreme heat and particulate matter in particular. And they were elderly, and of course, were not necessarily out in the community, but they lived in their homes and they had a lot of ongoing, I would say, chronic medical problems. Um, I experienced more of my patients going into the hospital for dehydration and bladder infections, and this was because they needed to have more overall oral hydration. Um, Many times, most of the times, this was caught, and they readily got better with hydration and mitigation with antibiotics, etc. But a lot of these patients also were not cognitively intact given their age, and we had to instruct their family members or their keepers, their 24-hour caregivers, and or suggest, if that is not available to them, that they get more, should we say, supervised living environments, which of course is code for many people retirement homes and nursing homes, which they don't want. However, when you have patients that are being admitted multiple times throughout a season, when we've had high PMI with high particulate matter, such as what we've had in the last year or so, you do see demise of a particular group of people, and that tends to be the elderly, people with cardiovascular and respiratory compromise. And it has nothing to do with, it has a lot to do with lifestyle, but when you get to be in your 80s and 90s, your system is fragile relative in terms of keeping bad molecules out. And many times there's cognitive decline, and they're not able to evaluate and know when they're getting into trouble. So for this reason, I see extreme heat to be one of the deadliest climate changes that we've experienced, at least in North America. And we really need to do something. We need to get on board and mitigate it, identify those that are at risk, make sure there are systems in place, either through community agencies, through housing, where they can actually do mitigation and check on individuals and make sure that they're not doing things that are incorrect, like going out, not drinking enough water, not taking their meds because maybe it makes them go to the bathroom a lot and they don't want to drink the water, yet, having more medical problems. So we have a lot that we need to do to address our elderly and our medically involved older patients to keep them alive through these climate disasters. By and far, with any disaster, whether it is flooding, whether it's fires, emergencies because of particulate matter and elevated matter in terms of causing infections and pulmonary disease, the majority of anybody, like the Maui floods, the Camp Fire in California, the bulk of the people that are dying are over 65. Mm-hmm. And so that population is quite vulnerable. And this is just something that has really flashed up in the last 3 to 4 years. Of course, you say, well, we have the baby boomers and all these folks that are contributing to this large population that's aging all at once. But I have to tell you, the baby boomers are getting old. And
Correct,
we
yes.
hope to take precautions because we are seeing what's happening to the people that may be 1 or 2 decades ahead of us. And it's up to us to force government standards to change so they actively go over the polluters of our air, of our fisheries, of our waters, and really try to stop this. And we really need to do it on a world level. We may need to embarrass the U.S. government and wildlife if they're not stepping up as much, because we do know that other countries in the world that have had all kinds of floods that we really have not really paid attention to because it didn't involve us in the U.S. We have a lot of protections in terms of, how we built things. We're not exposed to as many extremes of heat and flooding as third world nations are that have, a very large population that is rural by comparison to the U.S. And they've experienced this a lot earlier, and we're just kind of finding out about it or caring about it, and it's showing up in the news all over the world. But we know what's happening now, and we all have to look up and say, okay, what can I do to mitigate some of this, and how can I prepare myself, whether it's changing my housing, whether it's changing what I eat, what I buy, because everything is going to be related to climate change in terms of what our production is, how we travel, in terms of fossil fuels, planes and cars, need to go electric. There needs to be more mass transportation. We need to have more shade trees, because when you have particulate matter coming from fires that are lit just by the heat in some of these really dry forested areas out west and in the northern western Canada, we've experienced what it's like to have ongoing fires that just burn, that cannot be controlled until they just burn out. And then they're allowed, like what happened a year or so ago with the Canadian fires. They started more in the west, but they just moved right across to the east, and they tore up New York and that whole area, air quality, something like we had never seen before. It was frightening. And I have to say that is one of the biggest sources of particulate matter formation is wildfires, because you cannot prevent them. And, when you have a dry climate where you don't have a lot of water, and it may not even be an individual or a person that starts a campfire, it could be just nature, something ignited and it just burnt until it came out of control. But that fouls the environment substantially, and it doesn't recover in one season. So we have to move forward. And yes, a lot of the things we discussed earlier are very good, but aging is aging. But pollution and PMI production by these natural occurrences, we really have to get a jump on.
And with all of this taken into consideration, why in the world would you light up a cigarette and add insult to injury?
That's really key because
And
we
we're-
know that our community, we have quite a higher percentage
Smoke.
of those smoking. So that's really key there as well.
Yes.
And these are not talking about the forest fires and the California fire. It's not because somebody left a lit fire, like they were camping and they
Correct.
moved on
Yes.
and they didn't get the embers out. And it's not as if somebody was carelessly throwing away a cigarette butt. It's not that simple. These are changes that are occurring just because of the desiccation of the ground and the dry wood. And the fact that this can ignite just with nobody around because it's gotten so dry in a lot of our forest areas because of lack of rain. So I don't see this getting any better unless we try to mitigate this in some way. And right now, I don't think we have sprinkler systems that we can put out for the West and the Canadian West with their very dense forests that are getting old, that are drying out. So it's just a matter of monitoring that, and then having forest people say, "Oh, there's a flash, there's extra heat," to go in there and mitigate it. But right now, they don't have a really coherent way to do that. That wouldn't be very costly.
Well,
Thank
the
you.
most recent one is now in New Mexico.
Yeah, I
They've
mean,
been
I
talking
keep
about
seeing
that.
it and it keeps popping up. This is Karen Dotson from the Medical College of Wisconsin with the All of Us Research Program. And joining us today, we have Dr. Renee Settle Robertson and Dr. Carla Wright. And we have a caller. And caller, we want to welcome you to the table.
Yes. Good morning, ladies.
Good
I want to
morning.
thank all of you so very much for being there and sharing this very important information with the community. I want to thank you for that first of all.
Yes.
And good morning to Mr. Devo.
Yeah, he's definitely here with us. That's right.
Okay. Ladies, I would just like to quickly add to what you were saying about our more mature citizens having challenges when with this global warming and the heat index.
Mhm.
As you realize, a lot are on very limited income.
Okay.
And therefore, a lot of them don't turn their air conditioners on because they paid a high payment bill. So they'll sit there and, like you said, try to ride it out. And one other thing I heard from my doctor, when you get to a certain age, you have to really be careful because your body that regulate the temperature and stuff. As you age, you may not feel that heat like you did when you was younger. So that's another contributing factor.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So our more mature citizens, that they have those challenges to deal with also. And as you know, if you look at the news, it's going to be in the 90s most of the rest of the week, and God knows for how long. So I appreciate the information that you gave. Our people should check on our elderly senior citizens in our household to make sure they're okay. Because like I said, because of that, how much money they receive, they hesitate to turn on that air conditioner. And that's the unfortunate part about that. So I just wanted to add that quick because you're absolutely right. But those other two factors I was just thinking of. So thank you for accepting my call, and everybody have a good day.
Thank you, caller, for being at the table with us this morning. Dr. Carla Wright?
Yes, I wanted to address some of his key issues that he brought up, and I thought they were very excellent. We should look at plans, and what he addressed was the elderly population or people that are living alone that may have cognitive impairments and a lot of medical impairments, and they don't know how to survive and what they need to do when you have global or heating emergencies such as what we may have and what we've had in the past. There needs to be some sort of a way that seniors can be identified that have special needs, i.e. maybe they cannot walk and go up and down steps, or they're hearing impaired, or they're visually impaired, or they're on certain monitors to help promote health, like pacemakers, things of that nature, oxygen. And so they would be at high risk. I think we need to talk to municipalities, and not just here, but throughout the country, and have a way to know who is living where. Are they in accessible buildings where they can be reached in case of fires and floods, and have a plan, evacuation plan. And that is something I think a lot of us need. I know they've started something in Washington, D.C. called DC Alert, where they have an idea of where people that are above a certain age with certain mobility and medical issues exist. At least they have an idea of who they may need to rescue initially, as opposed to people, that are more able-bodied. And to not really think about that throughout most communities, which are, that are especially in big cities, as we've had these climate changes, I think is bad. We really have to look at our seniors and our disabled who are living in cities where it's kind of like if you had an emergency crew that would go in and rescue people, who are the people that are least able to mobilize themselves because of mobility, cognitive issues, etc. And I think that's something that also should be addressed in communities, metropolitan areas where you have a lot of folks, you have a lot of concrete, you don't have a lot of trees. So you may have a lot of individuals that are living in heat and desiccation. We have a program here, just so that folks know about this, where they do give out air conditioners, and I use that program for my patients.
Great. We need to know about it. Please share.
It's with the city of Milwaukee City, and they do have a way to give air conditioners. These are unit, ones that you would put in the window.
Yes.
But if you can choose an area where a person lives or can sleep in for the bulk of the time during the hot months, they don't have to open up their windows, or they can put an air purifier on the outside to kind of trap anything that might be blowing in. And it's an air conditioner project. It's through the city of Milwaukee, and I've actually utilized it for several seasons. And what I think it's something that is done primarily through a physician's office. So when you see a patient and you know that they're elderly, they have all kinds of medical issues, at which might put them at risk for respiratory issues as well, and heat, overheating. All you have to do is fill out a form for the city and say X, Y, and Z, and she needs to have an air conditioning window unit. Because of da 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 da. And I don't know. I know up until last year they had this program, and we, at least at my clinic, we had several people get unit air conditioners to be put into their homes, so they at least ambient temperature in one large room would be more bearable. So this is also something else that I think people need to know about, and I think you can call the city of Milwaukee. And probably do it sooner than later, and just find out what's going on this year. There may be new and different things they're doing. We talked about increasing cooling centers that are pet friendly. You say, well, why do you say that? Well, there are a lot of seniors that get a lot of joy from a pet. And if you're asking them to evacuate for 24 hours and they're able to take care of that pet, they're not going to leave that pet if there's nobody else, and especially if they know that the outcome is that they could be dead because, it's hot where they are.
Right.
And they're going to leave their master or mistress. So we want to stress for cooling centers that accept pets. And it's not a funny thing. It's actually something that will allow people to say, you know what, I can move out. I can pack a little bag and have my meds, change of clothes, and pack up, my friends, my dog's food and this, that, and the other, and make allowances for that. Because a lot of seniors find that their pet is their companion that gives them love and gives them attention. And it's almost a surrogate for a child. So we've stressed with some of the community centers that they really need to do this and allow this, whether it's going to be in a library, in an arena area where they set up where folks can sleep if they want to and have bottled water until the emergency passes. But that is something we need to stress. A lot of folks are afraid to do that because they're going to be out in the public with other people. But when you have these climate action events that occur on an acute capacity, I think knowledge of what's available is going to be very helpful. And if the family members of these people know that it's available, they may actually go with them if they don't want to be there alone. Because a lot of people say, well, I'm going to be there with strange folks, and will I sleep, and who's going to steal stuff? And I can't say that doesn't happen, but I can at least say if you're alive and maybe, your purse was, or something was misplaced, because I can't imagine, but you never know. I think folks would leave more, because a lot of folks, when they're older, don't want to leave the sanctity of their home because they know that, and that makes them feel comfortable.
They're very comfortable. Before we go to break, I just wanted to mention something that you said was so important, is that we need to have a plan. Even though we talk about the city having a plan, we need to have a plan individually,
Yes.
for our loved ones, for ourselves as well. Like, because some of these things are going to happen where we're not used to the flooding and the water.
Right.
And then all of a sudden now we're going to have to deal with this. So we need to start having a plan about how to handle this situation.
And I have stressed individually with my patients that they need to have a plan within the family, or whomever your significant other or relatives are. Have a code. No, actually, even keep, I would say in the summer months, keep a bag packed. We say 1 to 2 weeks of medication, change of clothing, water, food that does not have to be prepared. I mean, that's horrible. That means fresh fruit. That means some canned things. But if you have to evacuate, you have to evacuate.
Yes.
And then have somebody on speed dial on a cell phone identified as relatives, just in case something happens. A senior is living alone. They break down the door. They get her or him. They get the pet and they remove them. But then, okay, who do we contact?
Mm-hmm.
So if they have a cell phone where somebody can pick it up and they can't talk and they can hit it, this person's contact is blah, blah, blah. They can not only, get that person out of that bad situation into a, whatever you want, okay, a place where they're staging folks and giving them food and shelter and all that. They can actually talk to the individual family member that's probably worried sick and say, we have so-and-so and so-and-so.
Okay, and I know that Dr. Renee Settle Robinson, you have some comments before we go to
just one
close.
last thing. You need to know that our President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act to address climate change, and he put a rider on it called Justice 40, which says 40% of all the funds that go into that Inflation Reduction Act must be spent in our neighborhoods, the 53206, to mitigate a lot of the problems that we're having. We're suffering the most from this climate change, and we've contributed the least to the fact that we do have climate change.
I want to thank you ladies for joining us at the table today.
Yes.
Dr. Carla Wright, and also Dr. And I always got to get your name right as far as when I'm looking at it, because I want to say it right. Renee Settle Robinson. These ladies are so involved in the community. Looking at climate now, this is something new that they're taking the initiative to do beyond all the other work that they have been doing in the community and servicing the community, bringing something new to us. Lastly, I wanted to mention to everyone that the All of Us Research Program, as one caller mentioned, that they were actually looking for us at Juneteenth Day. And so I wanted to remind people that we will be on June 26th, we're going to be reclaiming wellness, dismantling health stigmas for men of color. That's going to be Wednesday, June 26th at 6 o'clock at Jean's Clippers at 2200 North Martin Luther King Drive. Also, we're going to be at Frederick McKinley Health on Wednesday, July 10th. From 8:30 to 3:30. And finally, we're going to be at the Outreach Community Health Center, July 12th and 26th. And where you're located at? All right, we're going to be there July 12th and July 26th. I want to thank everybody for joining us at the table today. It's been a pleasure. Please be conscious of the heat. Be conscious of what we're doing in our communities, what we're doing also in our homes, and how we can filter the air very easily, as was discussed by our doctors here. And it's been great. We'll look forward to talking to you soon at the table.
Check, 1, 2.
These sounds can only mean one thing. It's Summerfest! 600 artists,